All right, let's get right into a really fascinating and maybe a little uncomfortable idea. This theory that society has always been kind of scared of its most intelligent people. Not because they're wrong, but because they see things that others, well, they just refuse to. You know that feeling? You're in a conversation, you try to bring up a more complex idea, and you're just met with these blank stares. Or you notice how fast people change the subject when you steer away from small talk? Yeah, if you spend a lot of time in your own head, that feeling is probably pretty familiar. And here's the thing, that feeling, it's not just you being weird or overly sensitive. It is a completely predictable reaction, and it's rooted deep in our psychology, our biology, and even our history. So let's break down exactly why this happens. Okay, so the first piece of this whole puzzle is a psychological concept that explains that immediate gut-level discomfort people can feel around a deep thinker. It's something called the mirror effect. So what on earth does that mean? Well, it suggests that a really intelligent person doesn't just introduce a new idea. Their very presence can act like a mirror that reflects back the intellectual blind spots and limitations of everyone else in the room. And as you can imagine, that is a deeply uncomfortable thing to see. So most people's first instinct is to just resist it. And what's so wild is how we have this total double standard. Think about it. We admire physical strength, right? We see it as this external quality, something that can be protective. But intellectual strength? Whoa, that's a different story. Because our thoughts and our beliefs are so tangled up with our core identity, someone who thinks on a deeper level can feel like a direct threat to our entire sense of self. But this isn't just some vague psychological feeling. It's actually hardwired into our biology. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because your brain can interpret a challenging idea as a literal physical threat. That's right. Neuroscience actually shows that when we're confronted with a radically new idea or we feel intellectually outmatched, it can light up the amygdala. That's the exact same part of the brain that fires up when we're facing, a predator. For most of human history, survival meant fitting in with the tribe, not being the smartest person in the room. And our brains are still wired for that social acceptance, often over pure, simple truth. And check this out, it shows just how important the social context is. A 2021 Stanford study found that while people feel way less threatened by an intellectual in a one-on-one setting, that threat response goes through the roof in a group. So why is that? Because in a group, social status is suddenly on the line. The fear isn't just about being wrong anymore, it's about being seen as less intelligent by the rest of the tribe. And on top of all that, our minds have these built-in defense mechanisms that actively fight against deep thinking. You've got the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people tend to overestimate their own abilities. There's our natural bias for the status quo, which just makes new ideas feel dangerous. And then there's the backfire effect, where being challenged can actually make us double down on what we already believe. It's like our brains are working together to resist anything that rocks the boat. Now, this whole struggle is nothing new. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who was famously, brutally honest, he saw intelligence not as some amazing gift, but as a kind of beautiful curse that basically guarantees you'll be isolated. Schopenhauer believed humanity is split into two camps. He said most people are driven by what he called the will to live. The basic desire for comfort, pleasure, and just fitting in. But the highly intelligent person, they're often powered by the will to truth. This relentless, insatiable desire to understand how things really are, even if that reality is painful or lonely. And that creates a fundamental disconnect. And this quote just nails it. For Schopenhauer, the reason is simple. The more you understand the world, the more you see right through all the polite fictions and the status games that make up most of our social interactions. You start to crave real depth, but you find the world mostly prefers the shallow end of the pool. And that can make everyday life feel incredibly lonely. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's a pattern that we see repeated again and again throughout history. We love to celebrate these brilliant minds now, but we conveniently forget how they were treated in their own time. Just look at this list. Socrates, Galileo, Tesla, Turing. All of them were, in one way or another, punished for being ahead of their time. Their ideas were seen as disruptive, dangerous, a threat to the way things were. It shows this painful but really clear pattern. Society only seems to celebrate disruptive intelligence in hindsight, long after the threat has passed. So, yeah, this all sounds pretty bleak. I get it. If you're someone who identifies as a deep thinker, how are you supposed to navigate a world that doesn't always seem ready for you? Well, the good news is, you're not doomed to isolation. It just means you have to be a little more strategic. So here are a few key strategies. First, learn to navigate wisely. Not everyone is ready for your deepest thoughts, and that's okay. Save them for the people who can actually appreciate them. Second, and this is crucial, find your people. Build a community. And finally, practice communicating simply. I think it was Einstein who said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Let's end with one more from Schopenhauer, because it just reframes this entire struggle so perfectly. Your tendency to think differently, it's not a flaw. It's a sign of vision. It means you are seeing a target that simply isn't visible to everyone else yet. So while it's true that society often pushes back against its deep thinkers, the really crucial thing to remember is this. They are the ones who ultimately push humanity forward. That discomfort they cause, that's just the growing pains of progress. So if you've ever felt like an outsider because of your thoughts, remember that.